Welcome to the Leaders of Lasting Impact podcast. I'm Matt Pohl, your host, and I'm pleased to be joined today by Carl Cox. He is the CEO of 40 Strategy, and he'll be able to unpack that name here a little bit for us. He's also host of his own podcast called Measure Success Podcast. He was kind enough to have me as a guest a bit ago, and Carl's also authored the book Lost at CEO. And we'll give Carl a little bit of time to uh, tell us a little bit about what the book is about today, also. Carl, maybe just start off. Our audience is comprised primarily of small, mid-sized business owners and leaders within those organizations. Maybe share a little bit of your background that you think would resonate with that audience.
So first of all, I've been in your shoes for most of my career. So most of my career has been with that small to medium sized business. Yes, I've served lots of big clients, from Fortune 1, so to speak. But all the way to basically startup to 100 million has been where I've spent the majority of my career, and probably most of that has been between 0 and 50 million. And
Oh,
I love that part. I love the transitions that make, Matt, that's one of the things I love actually about what you do is how you've been able to identify the different stages there are in the growth path, right, of an organization. And I found that as well. And I find that so fun and exciting. Unfortunately, for a lot of the owners, it's not fun and exciting
yeah.
because, they have to go through these really difficult challenges, right, of who they should be bringing on to the next level. But just a little bit more of the background. I was fortunate enough to be with 7 different companies that have gone from 2x to 7x in size. And it's you learn a lot, right? You learn a lot from that process. You learn from the experiences that go through that. And I never had a plan, honestly, to be a consultant. That was not part of my goal. And what happened is through these experiences, first I was a bean counter for the first, became a CFO by the age of 30. And then they started, I mentioned it earlier, Matt, we were talking about, what do you do? How do you get to things? And I said, well, I actually used to have a tax practice, which was not my background in audit. I was back at Coopers and Lybrand way back in the day. Those familiar with that, part of PricewaterhouseCoopers now. And and so from that experience, I was like, so I grew up and they said, we'd love to invest in you, but not if you're going to leave us. And because I wanted to coach high school football, teach history in high school. And so I said, okay, we'll give this a shot and give it a try. So they started giving me opportunities. And what happened for me is the first thing they said, can you help us out with IT? And I don't know anything about IT. I mean, you turn off and on your computers about the extent of my skills, but we fixed it. We fixed the IT. We got a new ERP system in there and it went great. And then they said, Carl, can you help us out with technical support? You give me a hammer, I'm going to break that nail. I'm not an engineer. I am truly a bean counter by trade. And so but we fixed technical support. And then they say, hey, Carl, can you help us do a distribution center in Europe? I'd never been to Europe beforehand. And we ended up building 3 distribution centers in Europe and it went well. And I came back and they're like, how about you now build out, taking charge of operation and manufacturing? Never done that before. I was like, sure. And so I started going to Asia and doing supply chain management. We actually built manufacturing where we're located. It was an amazing experience. And
Wow.
that entire time, though, we're really fortunate. We had Fortune 500 executives at a small company,
Okay.
and they were teaching us strategic planning and execution the
Okay.
right way.
Okay.
And it was that where I found the joy. And then moving on, it was another company, bunch of different experiences. We grew from 70 employees to 450 employees in 3 years.
Wow.
And we loved strategy as well. Fortune 500 executives. Went to the next company and we had the opportunity. We actually opened up the US office for a strategic planning software company called Cascade Strategy. And that's how I ended up getting into where I'm doing today, because what had happened, we grew so much. And I started consulting because people didn't understand the software. And so wanted to make sure they were using the software. And eventually the CEO out of Australia said, Carl, I'd love you to now run my global consulting firm. And I was like, what an amazing opportunity. When he told me this, Matt, it was so appealing. We literally were in Sydney Harbor. We had these sea kayaks, beautifully clear water. I was a little scared there was like animals going to come out of it, but none of them did. And but it was an amazing experience. Like, Carl, why don't you run my global consulting firm? And it took me a while to consider it because I knew what that was going to take. I was going to have to be 80% gone to
Yeah.
really properly do this. And I have 4 kids, and I was like, I don't want to miss their whole experiences. And they've been fortunate; they've been in high school and collegiate athletics, and I was like, I don't want to miss all of that. So I politely declined, and that's how I opened up 40 Strategy. why we're called 40 strategy, what you're getting to earlier is only
Yeah.
2% of organizations' time is spent on strategy, which is about equivalent to 40 hours per year. So the concept is hire us to help you out with those 40 hours. So you design a world-class strategic plan and help keep you accountable to get it done. That's at the core of what we do.
Okay. Okay. So the 40, is the 40 just trying to make sure that that 40 is well done, or emphasizing that you need to spend more time than just the 40?
Let's say it's a little both.
Okay.
Some organizations don't do any strategy. Some organizations are really involved with strategy, but if you know strategy well,
Mhm.
you'd recognize that only about 10% of organizations actually do it properly.
Okay.
That's the sad truth. Only 10% of organizations get two-thirds of their objectives that they originally set out to get done.
Right.
And so that drives me crazy. And so one of the reasons I got into consulting is like, there's got to be a better way. And through my practical experiences, then in about a 5-year period, I read about 300 books to help understand the research side behind strategy. And
Okay.
and that's where I combined the research and practical experience to come up with the 7 principles that we use on a consistent basis, which gets our clients to have tremendous success so they can actually hit the goals and the accomplishments. We call them destinations, not goals anymore, because
Okay.
we want people to reach their destination. Matt, you get on an airplane, you expect you get to your
It's
destination,
going to
right?
get right.
All
A
right. But if I
goal.
tell you you're going to do a goal, you think a New Year's resolution, and you're like, okay, 6% of people get their New Year's resolution, right? So we want to get people to that real fun end result of being successful, and it works. And we've had so much success with our clients, and it's really fun to bring them through the journey of doing it the right way. And then they have confidence to do it again, right? That's the true testimony of clients when they say, "Can you come back again and do our next strategic plan so we
Right.
can get to that level?" And that's what's fun.
Yeah. What do you think, having been both internal in organizations, a number of them, and now you're doing consulting, advising with businesses? It seems like bringing in an outside advisor is a big deal. Many businesses just won't do it. Others, they do it once and it's kind of a new experience. Excuse me, what might you tell a business leader about why it works, that it can work, and why that dynamic actually works to bring in somebody from the outside?
What I've found, and I can say this when I was internal and then now doing it from an external basis, is that there's this narrative that happens within the company. And this is the way things are. And once again, it could be a company's 2 or 3, 5 years old. It could be a company's 10 years old, 20 years old, 30 years old. It doesn't really matter. But you get a narrative, and
Right.
all decisions are based on the internal thought processes, right?
Mhm.
And sometimes somebody needs to say it out loud to somebody outside the company to go, are we really thinking logically about this? And often what I find, Matt, is people are hiring me because they know intuitively they need to make a change,
Uh-huh.
and they want somebody from the outside to hear them and go, you're right. You do. And this is why. These are the things that you've mentioned. These are the
Mhm.
gaps that you have, and there is a way to solve them. And that's what gets them excited. So that's, I think, the value of that outside view, because we can help the entire team, not just the CEO, but the entire team go, hey, there's a reason we're not moving forward. Matt, you've experienced with your company. You can have the classic situation. Let's say you grew from 1 to 5 million, and that $1 million, you had a VP of sales. You gave their title, and you know this going right, Matt. You
Yeah.
have VP of sales, $1 million, but they get to 5 million. They now have to start managing people, right? They were really just a pure hunter in the past. They were a really good hunter. But then
Right.
we put them in this management role. And then we did 2 things bad. A, we took away our best salesperson and made him
Right.
a manager. And two, they weren't a good manager,
Right. So they're
right?
driving away everybody that's coming in behind them too.
That's exactly right. And also, we wonder why our sales stall out from sometimes from 5 to 10. That's just an example. But
Right.
things like that happen, right? Is that sometimes people in one role aren't good in the next role. And you often have to bring in new humans to help you to continue to scale during these different paths. And that's what I love. And you do too, right? We love the path of like these transitions of when people grow. And I love the changes of people, process, and systems. Unfortunately, internally, it's really difficult, right?
Mm.
Because you have somebody and they have this VP of sales title and there's ego involved there,
Right.
right? They're like, oh, you mean I can't continue to have that role? And it's like, well, where are you the best at, right? Wouldn't you rather be the best hunter in the world again for in terms of sales and continue to help grow our company and we can get somebody else to manage the people? Those are those conversations that people get caught up in that
Yeah.
you can't do internally typically, right? You need the help of somebody outside to help reflect and help make the best decisions.
Yeah, I think that outside perspective, like you said, part of it is just, I think, getting the permission to think differently or to try something different, right? Seems odd, but sometimes they need that permission, and hearing it from an outside source says, oh, okay, I'm not way off. I'm not crazy. We should try this new thing. And I think a lot of things, I think that a good advisor brings to a client is in the form of language, of just being able to provide language that creates structures, and within that structure, some clarity, right? So, um, there are certain areas like we talk about gates of focus, where business can focus on profit, process, and people to grow, and just understand those three things, kind of being able to just that simple language allows the brain kind of see more clarity there, because otherwise you just see just a lot of noise. And with just some simple language, a lot of times that can create a lot of clarity um, for the client. So um, when you look at the kind of businesses that you work with, do you see some common themes as far as industries or sizes, locations, or is it a pretty broad base for you?
Experientially, it's been very broad. We've found these principles can connect to any type of organization, which is great. Um, and we never try to become an expert. When we come in, we don't claim to be an expert in their company that they've been working with for 20 years. That's silly, right? That is like one of the worst things that somebody can do is, well, I did this at this other company. It's going to work for you. You have no idea, right? You have no idea based on the existing people, processes, and systems, whether a strategy used at the company down the street is going to work for them. And so since we're principle based, we can actually work with a lot of, now, who do we tend to work with? A lot of manufacturers, small to medium-sized manufacturers, a lot of services companies, people in construction,
Okay.
but we go beyond that. We actually have worked with not-for-profit organizations. We've worked with medical organizations. So it's technology. We've been with a lot of different parts. What, from my perspective, everyone is different and unique from a when you pull back, right? Everyone is unique. However, there's principles that apply to all of us, right? It's
Right.
sort of like gravity. Gravity works. We all know there's sales and net income, right?
Right.
That doesn't matter what company you're with. Those same principles apply. And the same thing is with strategic planning and execution. These principles apply to all of us. And so when we do it the right way, it gives us the confidence that we can talk to anybody who asked us to come out.
Yeah, and I think that's key, right? Is um, there are principles, there are fundamental truths that exist, and it's not like you've invented them. You're simply pointing them out and clarifying them, and then helping to apply those principles. I totally agree with that. The Rewild Group, we spend a lot of time. We focus on principles and structures because they're kind of these building blocks that, like you say, kind of can be reused in a lot of situations. But I think I like your observation that no, you can't be an expert on their business, but you can bring principles, and between your principles and their knowledge, that you really make these key discoveries that are really appropriate or totally appropriate for that particular business. Um,
And what it also does is it enables me to be more curious. I'll ask the dumb questions sometimes. And sometimes those dumb questions, when somebody asks them once again from the outside, they're
right,
like, oh, right. They have this big, oh, hadn't thought about it that way, right? And
right.
and so that's really interesting when we go through that process.
Well, that that's a great point, that ignorance of the details of an industry, because you're not you're not shaped by the things that have been done in that industry for many, many years. You're just coming in from the outside, like you said, asking the dumb question, when it really turns out to be a very insightful question because you don't have the blinders that just come with, when you work in a business for 10, 20 years, over time you do tend to narrow the options that you consider, right? Because oh, we tried a little bit of that years ago or a little bit of that years ago and it didn't work. So, you just kind of narrow, narrow, narrow. And yeah, I believe sometimes it just takes one simple idea that can totally change the mind, right? Change perspective on an issue. Um, when you look at the pain points maybe that business owners are feeling, and they feel like it's a good, well, when they talk to you, it seems like it resonates that you might be able to help them in those pain points. What are some of the pain or the challenges that they're facing, the symptoms that they might be struggling with that seem to be a good indicator that 40 strategy would be a good fit for them?
Matt, one of the most interesting experiences I had when I was growing up in my career, and I remember being this lowly controller at one point in a publicly traded company, and I remember saying a joke, and it'd be like a group of 10 people, and two people would half laugh, right? And I was like, oh, that was a bad joke, right?
Right.
But of course, me, I don't always learn, and I'll continue to say that joke because I thought it was funny. Well, the problem is, I remember becoming then that executive who was on top and running the organization. And I said the same joke that I said as a controller, and everybody was laughing out loud.
Hmm.
Okay.
Interesting.
All right. So, what this tells you, if you're a CEO, is as much as you hope that your team is telling you the truth, they have the fear that if they tell you the truth, they're going to lose their job, which is helping them to pay their mortgage. And once again, this is the value of bringing somebody from the outside to help bring to the surface the truth that you're not fully hearing. And then vice versa. Have the confidence for the CEO to say the truth to their team. That's when a CEO facilitates their own strategic planning session, they've handcuffed themselves from participating. Because what happens is it's their decision. Everything
Okay.
is their decision. There's no buy-in because
Right.
everyone has to agree to the CEO because that's what they're being paid to do.
Right.
But when you bring in somebody from the outside and you truly get, hey, I want your help on figuring out how to get there. And the CEO is listening on the side and participating, but not making all the decisions.
Mhm.
Then the team feels like, oh, this is different. I
Mm.
am a part of this decision and I will buy in. What most people don't know that 51% of middle managers actively try to sabotage a strategic plan from happening.
Really?
Yeah, Gallup has the data and information, and the why is think about it. They don't have incentive to make change. Their incentives are based on status quo.
Okay.
Okay. And so when all of a sudden we say, hey, we want you to work on this new project to automate your processes. What? Right? You mean you want to get rid of my
Please
team?
me.
You want to get rid of my people? You want me to put chat GBT now and get rid of my copywriter? Right? It brings once again, they're why they're there, as much as we think they're a part of the company, is they're there because they need to get paid to help provide for their families, right?
Right. Right.
And so when it comes down to it, they're not telling you the full truth. And so to develop plans where they're bought in, this management team is bought into it, you get them incorporated, and then they're a part of the solution. And then we hold them accountable. Say, I don't walk away, Matt, after I've done a strategic plan for the majority of my companies. I help monitor on a regular basis how things are going. And so they don't want to show up to that next meeting because this is what happens to all of us.
Uh-huh.
The time is the biggest factor why we don't do strategic planning because we go right back into in our business and get busy with our clients, our vendors, our supplier, everything, right?
Right.
We need to work on the business. That's about strategic. You cannot change direction unless you work on your business, work on those things. And so that's the value of that we bring is we help people work on it so they can turn the ship because otherwise they're going to keep on swaying in just whatever the direction the business brings them. And generally that's their clients. And that's not always a good thing, right? You could get into trouble by serving and doing the wrong things over the long term.
Yeah. Okay. Um, you talked a little bit about some of these principles that you use. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So the key principles, it's captain, and we use the kind of the sea analogy type concepts. My father was the Merchant Marines, my son's in the Naval Academy. I get seasick, so I don't know why I went through with them. But regardless of that, I do love the ocean, and I love the concept of what it brings. And so the first part of that is the sea is the compass. And we're a big believer in thinking long term. And this is even if you're planning to sell your company in 3 to 5 years.
Right.
When what people miss is when you're selling a company is the next set of buyers want to know what value they're getting next, not now, right?
Mhm.
They're
Mhm.
buying on the growth opportunity. So having a vision that's 5 to 10 years out is really valuable for that, right? It's outside of typically if you're planning to sell your business outside that window. Even if you're not planning to sell your business, and we believe in really creating a deep picture of what that looks like. Not just we're not talking about a vision statement here. We're talking about where where are your people going to be? Who are you going to be your customers in the future? What does your technology look like, right? Deeper level concept of what that vision of what it's going to look and feel 5 to 10 years down the road. So that's first thing we do. Second thing is we aspire. And once again, we use destination, not goals. We set these 3-year goals and 1-year goals. I use the term destination. We call them destination harbors. And we do that because we need to get to a harbor, right? Before we can get the destination. It's like a foundational block before we get to that 3-year position.
Okay.
That's the aspiration. And we like to have them be a little bit aspirational. They're not your budget.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Your budget is, if you're typically setting 1-year goals, you should have like a 90% chance of success. If it's a 3-year, 70%. If it's a 10-year, 51%. Right. So it's not pie in the sky stuff, but it's forcing you. And the why behind this is you want to change your habits, and you will not change your habits if you say we're going to grow 3% next year. Right.
Right.
We're just going to beat inflation. And so we need to get to a higher. So that's one part. Then creating the plan. This is the how that I was mentioning earlier. And this is where we're a big believer in that initial, if you've done a retreat and you're listening today, congratulations. But if you thought you were done in the retreat, that's typically why it fails. I really believe is getting the how and the people involved and to how to solve it is after the meeting. And so in our process, we have this after the meeting planning session where we go through that. The next step, when we do it along the whole way, is we trim down the plan to the essential few. We use the Pareto principle. And for those who are familiar with the 80-20 rule, which is the Pareto principle, 20% of your actions have 80% of your results. Let's focus on those things. And that's what we do. So that's the trimming part. This is a silly one, but we actually start. We act, that action. It's amazing how many plans have an end date, but they don't have a start date.
Hmm.
Okay. And so we incorporate start dates with that process. The next step is we have indicators. And most people's strategic plans are based on the outcomes, i.e., we want to grow 10%, we want a certain amount of net income or EBITDA. That's our focus or we're trying to go towards. The problem with that, that's not how you get there.
Right.
You need to focus on your things you can control, your leading indicators.
Leading
So
ones.
we want 80% of the goals to be, measurements, KPIs, to be leading indicators, not lagging.
Mhm.
Um, then after the end, we got an indicator, and then next is okay, you've succeeded, ideally with reaching your destination. Celebrate. That's super important to celebrate what you've succeeded, but most importantly is what are you going to do next? What did you learn from what you just did? And where are you going to your next place? Right. Because the process of strategic planning and execution is not just a one and done. It's like, hey, let's celebrate. Yay, we got our trip to Hawaii, whatever it might be. But where are we going next? And I don't know if for those of you who do travel, and I'm sure several of you do, one of the worst things, right, is like you might be ready to get home after a long trip, like vacation, but there's this, oh, we're going back, right? There's this decline. And that's what happened with most companies is after they've done a big accomplishment, is they go back and start relaxing and they go back to their old habits. And that's why it's important to get ready to set your next goal, set your next vision, set your next purpose, because you want to keep people motivated. right, of where to go next. And I think it's okay to have a little bit of a season in between, a short season, but not
Right.
a long season.
Yeah.
And so that's our captain strategy methodology. And it these principles are, there's a lot more detail, of course, I'm not providing, and this is a, we do a full day course in this, right? And just these concepts. But
Right.
there's these things work, and it's interesting. Each one of them are not, as you said, are not necessarily unique, but the combination I haven't seen before. I haven't seen it completely done in this way. And that's why we deploy all 7 of them, not just 2 or 3 of them. Now,
Right.
granted, with certain companies, clients, we might work on only a few pieces because they've already got some of the other stuff figured out, but
Mhm.
we're here to help and get things done.
Yeah, that's great. Like you said, it's a system. It gets strategy. Because when we talk about strategy, it can just seem such a big thing, right? It's like, where do you start? Where does you end? How practical is it? And a lot of CEOs I interact with is they're very action oriented. And the idea of sitting down and just thinking is not, it's not their, that's not their area of strength. But if you're not doing that critical thinking, you may be running fast, but you may be running fast in the wrong direction.
That's right.
So you got to do that critical thinking. So um, I'm curious if you'd be willing to share a story or two of a client and kind of how you've had a long-term impact on them.
Yeah, I could talk about one of our first clients, and we've shared some testimonials out there. If you look on our internet, sorry, on 40strategy.com, we have some testimonies from our, but one of our first clients, this actually right as we are getting ready to start a company, they said, "Hey, we'd love to talk with you." I was like, "Hang on a second, I'm getting ready to start and go off and get started a new company. Let's talk on the other side." But he came in, he thought he figured out his problem, and
Okay.
he came and he said, "Carl, I want you to solve this one indicator," meaning it was a particular process that they were doing. And he's like,
Mhm.
"If I fix this one process, I think that we could solve all the world's problems." And I was like, "Okay, well." So we did an engagement, and initially it was interesting. He said, "Carl, I only want to meet with you." And I said, "Whoa, wait a second. Don't you have more people running your company? I would really like to engage with them as well." And so we ended up, for the first time ever, he had his first broader senior team meeting.
Okay.
And so we went and had this first meeting, and it was really interesting because we went down this path, they're going down this path of this process that they wanted to fix.
Right.
But then I pulled back when I said, "So how do you make money?" And for those listening, think about that for a moment. How do you make money? Have you actually tracked in a flow chart how you make money? And if you do it, if you've done it before, it's really interesting. One of the things we do is a value stream map.
Mhm.
What that means is we'll go from the beginning to end. This is when an order comes in as a sales order, and then this is when from delivery or collecting cash. And we'll track, and then we'll track each process that goes through it. But then there's a cycle time between each step.
Right.
Typically, there's a ton of waste in that. In this particular example, this client was in general doing a purchase order would come in, and by the time they did delivered their service, it was approximately 140 business hours. Okay,
Okay.
so basically 4 weeks, 3.5 weeks, 4 weeks. Um, that was what was typically happening. We found that the process time only took them 24 hours. The actual effort to do the work was only 24 hours.
Mm.
And there was this big aha. I literally walked away, Matt, from this this is one of my first 3 clients. I went on the phone in between sessions. I was like, "Honey, I'm going to make these guys millions of dollars." And I went back and told Kenny this. I said, "Kenny," we had a fun conversation about it, but it's what happened. We
Yeah.
were able to find out that we can actually get their services down to 40 hours by eliminating the waste in between.
Mm.
And they were able to double their income. This was a, multi millions of dollars in just 1 year.
Wow.
And so our experience is we typically have a 3x return with our clients, meaning, if you invest money, it's a minimum 3x. Sometimes we have a 100x return with our clients. We haven't been in a situation yet where we haven't been able to, once they've gone through execution, to see significant results. And that's what's fun, right? Because as much as I love to facilitate and talk and go through things, it doesn't matter if we don't get it done, right?
Right. Right.
And so there's one of our early examples. And just to let you know, Kenny and I still talk every week. We have this coaching. He's decided to hire me on as a coach through the period of time, and we're continuously work through stuff because there's always new opportunities. He appreciates the outside feedback on concepts they're doing. And we talk, and it's so, as you can imagine, it's way beyond strategy, right? We do get down to tactics, we get down to details.
Sure.
I'm recommending people to him on a regular basis to help out. We have a great relationship, and it's been fun. So that's been one of my. I mean, once again, we have a lot of great clients, but that's been really neat, right? When you could have somebody. This is, yeah, it was literally 4 years ago that he signed up with us, and he's still with us today.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, you're right. When you saw the distance, the time it was taking, and saw that, wow, this is 4 times whatever it was, multiples of what it could take, um, and be able to deliver that to them, right? I mean, you make money because you're adding value to them, but being able to see how they just prospered as an organization because of that, that's super uh, enriching to you, right?
Yeah. Oh, and it's all the way around, right? It's truly a win-win. I mean, when you have the dream, the vision, you see it, and then you
Right.
go through and execute it, and then you see the results. It's almost addictive, right? You like want to keep doing it. It's fun. It's like I want to keep on going down this path, and that's how many of the clients are. They're like, we now have our next challenge, right? We have our next opportunity. Because you're going to solve the good news is you're going to solve problems, right?
Right.
But there's always another opportunity to fix something else. One of the things, Matt, you may not be aware of this, and we could talk more offline about it. One of the biggest challenges in business, if you're thinking of selling your business, right? So you and I are really familiar with this, but generally the value of business is EBITDA, earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization, for those who are familiar with it, times a multiple, right? So
Right.
most people go, I'm going to fix the EBITDA and improve that to increase my sales. But what they
Right.
miss
Is
is that multiple can be fixed.
mhm.
It is not a market driven. It's based on how risky you are as a company. And when you de-risk these areas, and we've put it down to 40 strategy. Well, we've used our brand name to bring it down to 40 strategies. We do hundreds and hundreds of strategies, but we know these 40 strategies are the 40 most important when it comes to de-risking your business to increase your multiple. So think if you're $1 million EBITDA business and you could bring your multiple from 4 to 5, that's another $1 million in your sale,
Right.
right? Just that one example. And people go, oh, I just look on the internet. That's what it is. That's not what it is. It's
Right.
based on de-risking your company. And so we have a tool now which actually helps with this assessment.
Mm.
We could actually quantify ahead of time the amount of money they're going to get from making these on the business risk part changes.
Mm.
And it, Matt, once again, we'll talk about this offline, but this is the holy grail of, in my opinion, of strategic consulting, because one of the biggest challenges all of us have in this business is, can I provide you value? Right.
Right. Right.
And what this does is it prioritizes the things we need to work on. It gives us an ascertainable value of what it's going to be, and then
Right.
we could prioritize it. We just worked with this with another client. We were already working on their plan, and it was interesting. The things they're working on now, what I call are in the business changes for the
Okay.
most part, and they're working, and we need to get them done. But they were so, initially they were a little skeptical, and they were like, "Oh wow, I need to work on these." And I said, "Hang on a second, don't work on them yet. Fix these other things first, because this is going to bring up our EBITDA, which we need to get first.
Right.
And then let's work on the business. So when it comes to ready to sell, we're going to get the most value out of the company." And that's this. What's so cool about, this, you can increase the valuation of your company without increasing your earnings,
Right.
right? And so that's what we are doing now. And we now have a tool to help assess it and to go through that process. And it's so exciting. It's for us, it's been a massive game changer. And it's really helping our clients out too, get the insights, right? Okay, this is why we need to do this. This now makes more sense than you just telling me. If that makes sense. It's like, if I could save $500,000 by investing $25,000 into this change, I'm going to make that change.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a no-brainer then. If you were sitting down with a CEO of a small or mid-sized business, what kind of a general word of wisdom, piece of advice might you give them? Obviously there's a lot of personal uniqueness there, but what's kind of a piece of advice that you think would resonate and help the typical business owner?
Well, I'll go to when it comes to strategic planning. I'm going to go to strategic planning here for a minute because, of course, this is my core. And one of the things I like to mention too is strategic planning is a hypothesis. It's not a fact.
Mhm.
Okay. So what does that mean? One of the biggest reasons why people hate doing it is because they see in the past of one of their lives when they're with another company this strategic plan that just collecting dust.
Mhm.
And the reality is it is arrogant to presume you're going to know everything that's going to happen in the future. We don't know, right?
Right,
Who had ever thought COVID was going to happen back
right.
in January 2000, and like I guess you have to go back to October 2020 before, 2019,
Yeah,
before the ship and all those issues that were happening, originally but for the most part, we were completely blindsided, right? When all that took place. The same thing happened in World War II. One of the greatest insights ever in terms of strategic planning and execution was D-Day.
right.
And for those who've seen Saving Private Ryan, I'm sure you've seen the movie, right?
Yep,
And
yep.
Tom, you know, and you see the getting on Omaha Beach and their first uh, goal, right? If you may, or place we're trying to get to is we're trying to get to the beach. If we don't get the beach, right, we potentially lose the war.
Right,
And so they got on the beach, but then the very next day, they had no idea there were hedgerows. Now, for those who are familiar with history, and if you've been perhaps in Western France, hedgerows are these big, basically trees that are underneath that go over the roads. You have these old fields that had been farmed for years, and our Sherman tanks were sitting ducks in this thing. And so our whole plan was to get to Cherbourg in like 3 days, and it took us over 2 weeks. Now, why did we succeed? They knew there was a commander's intent to get to Cherbourg. And so they completely changed how they were attacking to get through to their objective. My point here is that whenever you go down to path and you assume it's going to happen right, it won't. You're going to have to adjust, you're going to have to modify, and you're going to have to allow for time to get there. And so the theory once again is a strategic plan is a hypothesis. It's not a fact. And the more we have that as a CEO, having the mindset of being curious as to what we could do next, as opposed to believing for sure what we're going to do next, I think you have such a greater likelihood of way exceeding your expectations rather than confining yourself to what you believe to be true today.
right. So keeping that in mind that you have to be flexible.
That's right.
Your point was that the outcome was still reaching that town in Normandy, right? So that was still it turned out to be the right goal destination, but they had to adjust based on the reality on the ground.
That's right. That's right. That is the part. And so yeah, so that's one of the we do when we work with clients, for example, we don't most people review annually, some of them review 6 months, some review quarterly. Best companies review monthly in a management perspective, but we actually encourage people to start looking weekly. We do
Hmm.
weekly sprints.
Okay.
And this changes your outcomes so much faster, right? Because you're constantly learning. The reality is this, once again, of those who are involved in this type of process and have done it before, your experience, like most people are, as you said, I want you to get this done at the end of the quarter. The night before, people are working on it to get it done. Okay. Let's just be
Right.
honest, right? That's the reality. The problem with that is it doesn't get done with high quality. people don't think about it and they just try to get it done, right? They're just
Right.
checking a box.
Yeah.
Do we do we want to be a check? Do we want to be a bureaucracy and like a government and we're just checking the box? No, we want to think along the way so we can adapt to the best outcome.
Mm.
And when I learned that, that was actually these principles come from the 12-week year, which is a great book, and it talks about this concept of iterating faster, learning faster. If you make failing faster, it might be the other way of saying it, right?
Right. Right.
So you find out immediately that there's a hedgerow, as opposed to waiting the night before the board meeting, finding out there's a hedgerow, right?
Okay. Well, being flexible, right? That's something that every CEO needs to be able to do, right? Reality is always putting up barriers that we have to figure out creative solutions to get around. And often our team can be a source of some ideas to help us navigate that. So, um, Carl, it's been a great conversation we've had today. We're kind of wrapping up here. I'm sure there's going to be some listeners who would like to reach out to you to learn more about 40 strategy and how you can help their businesses. What's a best way for them to connect with you?
So the best way is just go on our website, 40strategy.com, and feel free. You're going to see a ton of information there from our latest. It has information on our latest podcast. We have a strategy for Saturday blog, which I encourage you to sign up for. And we have a lot of information also on LinkedIn. My name I use is Carl J Cox for that. And so I encourage you that if you want to email me, and this is part of the email opportunity we have, is if first of all, our book, Lost at CEO, An Entrepreneur's Guide to Strategy, actually right now on Amazon, it's available for, I think, 99 cents. And so if you're interested in going out, it's an easy ebook buy, right? For a buck,
Okay.
you can learn quite a bit. And by the way, it's a story. It's intended that way. It's an easy read. We wanted to be
Okay.
a way where people are feeling it and they like they could be in the shoes of this person, that Jack, who's the story is about, this business owner. So it's a really fun story from that perspective. But secondly, if you actually want a signed copy, send me an email at carljcox at 40strategy.com. And we will actually send you a free signed copy. This is for people who are referencing this podcast. And we'll be happy to accommodate that for you and your guests and audience that you have out there.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, Carl. So 40strategy.com gets you to the base information, and reach out to Carl if you're interested in getting a signed copy of the book. And again, mention Leaders of Lasting Impact so he knows where you had heard of him and 40 Strategy. Okay, well, I think we've come to the end of our time today. Appreciate the insights and really your focus on strategy, how you apply principles to help small and mid-sized businesses really reach their potential, right? To really see their potential and then go and find the ability to reach that potential. So, um, thanks. I want to also thank our audience today. Thanks for listening to us, Leaders of Lasting Impact. And we hope that you'll join us for the next episode. And we wish you all success in pursuing your goals, your strategies in your business. Thanks again.